Step 6 made me realise, the things about me that I needed to change. It gave me an opportunity to look a bit more into those defects and find out exactly what they were and what I needed to do to change them.
This is where the magic truly happens. A lot of people become fearful around steps 4 and 5, but step 6 and 7 is where it happens. This is where change occurs.
They're very much a step where action is involved. So having recognised that we've got shortcomings, having moved through step 4 and 5 where we've shared what is in our past, we also have to recognise that we have these ongoing shortcomings.
So what would have happened in steps 4 and 5, or particularly in 5, is your sponsor or your the person that you're reading it to will then build up a list of your character defects, because they will then see patterns of behaviour. So this happens and I behave like this. This happens and I behave like this. So these are where you get your character defects from.
We are acknowledging that we have our defects, but we're also acknowledging that we have choice and we can change. And really, step 6 is about acknowledging that opportunity to change.
My way of managing my character defects, of managing my my fears, my irresponsibility, my selfishness, my pride, all those things, I would just deny them and pretend they didn't exist, try not to show them. I didn't want people to see the parts of me that I didn't like. And I realised that way didn't really work. That way they were still controlling me. So I had to find another way of doing it.
I had it kind of spelled out for me, because my ego and my mind won't allow me to see my faults. It tells me that it was justified, that I had a good reason to behave in that fashion, or think the way I did. So it was difficult for me to see.
So step 6 for me was really about bringing all these defects, these parts of me that I wanted to change, from that place where they were hidden into the light, so from the darkness into the light, where I could look at them and get them out there, so I had much better chance of being able to change them.
I had to kind of accept that I had these defects of character before I could be ready to have them removed. And then when I really saw myself for how I was, then yeah, of course I was ready. I wanted them gone, I wanted them removed so that something more positive could be put in its place.
Your character defects are your personality. It's who you've become. It's who you are. So it's not something that you can just shed off like a coat, particularly if you're not aware of it. What happens is you become so comfortable in wearing that coat. This is how you behave. This is how you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what you start seeing with step 6 is, now that you're aware of this behaviour, it can become very, very painful if you continue to act in this particular way, because your sponsor will identify that you hurt people when you act in your character defect. So you're then faced with a choice. I'm raising awareness. This is what you do when this happens. Are you willing to change? So the addict has a choice. Carry on in the same way with awareness, which he didn't have before, or change.
And I think the reason we hold on to them is because they're too painful to face. And we have to acknowledge the fact that we're responsible for holding on to these things, These are ideas, principles that we might have grown up with, somebody else's in childhood or whatever. We hold on to them because we don't know any other way. Speaking from myself, I was ill-equipped to deal with life and everything it threw at me.
And 6 and 7 are a key. They're an actual key to change, because it says, how am I now? How am I now that I'm clean and sober? How am I behaving? And if I look at my defects or the things that I don't do well, I have to admit those defects and say, okay, I want to change them.
I found it very difficult to acknowledge my defects of character, in the fact that I took any criticism as an assault and affront on my character. I would get very hurt. It was ridiculous. I took every criticism, helpful or relevant or not, as an attack. So it really took a while for me to get my head around these defects of character.
As I identified a character defect, I learned what the spiritual principle that was opposite to that defect was. So when I was feeling fear, and fear was getting in the way of me doing something, I learned that I needed to practice courage. If I was thinking quite judgmentally towards people, I needed to be more open-minded. With the defect of pride, I needed to be more humble.
Trying not to act out on them. Trying not to act out, you know. A massive defect for me was lust, you know. Acting out on lust. Impatient, intolerant, self-seeking, self-centred, selfish. It was all about me. I try not to do that today. If I said I didn't do that today, I'd be a liar. But I try to counter-react and with the opposite. Instead of being self-centred, I try and do something for someone else to get myself out of self. You start looking at yourself and you start being patient, being tolerant, being less selfish, being less lustful.
If we're clean and sober, that's one thing. But unless I change, I'm not going to stay clean and sober. And I have a lot of work to do around my change that I have to make. But what 6 and 7 does, it helps me to look at the defects or the things that I'm still not doing okay today. Even though I'm clean and sober, there will be things that I'm still not doing in the right way that I need to change.
I think the important thing is, though, that in step 6, so often we see it as letting go of our defects. Some people think that those defects have got to almost be surgically removed. I think what it's really saying is that we accept that we have defects, but we can put them aside and we can make changes, and we now have choices.
I also realised that not all of these traits were going to get completely removed. You know, it's just parts of them. You know, things like fear are a natural response to situations. You know, fear is something that's really important to have. It teaches us to respond to situations that we need to respond to. But I looked at my life and realised that fear had become a defective thing in my life. So I was avoiding things that I needed to do down to my fear, and that I needed some help to remove the part of me that was the parts of that fear that were defective. So it wasn't about getting rid of fear completely out of my life. That wasn't something that was possible. But it would, through connecting with a higher power, through working the program, through doing my step 6, I became willing to have that part that was defective removed.
The spiritual principle in this step is willingness. And that's really, really important, because I'm now being made aware of a particular set of defects that are my character traits, my personality. These are the things that I've grown up with. These are the things that I've learnt how to behave. However, what I've been told by somebody is when I behave in some of these defects, I hurt other people. So it's now being made aware, am I willing to change?
The most important thing was that I was willing, even though I didn't entirely believe that my character defects would get removed, even though I was really unsure about the process. To start it, I was willing, and that was really what was required of me was to be willing. My thinking started to change, throughout the step. My thinking started to change, and I became more accepting of the step. I had faith in the program. I had faith in my sponsor. I had faith in the people around me, and I used that to enable me to do this step. So starting off this step with the faith that, despite what I thought and believed, it would work, really helped.
It's a lifetime journey from my defects to my assets, and hopefully what I'm looking at is getting less of those and more of that. I'm walking along that journey of life towards perfecting my assets, if you like, and to being kinder, more loving, more caring, rather than being the negative person that I've been in the past.
But after a certain amount of time, they kind of come naturally, If someone asks you to do something for them and you don't really want to do it, because you're lazy or because you're having a bad day, then for me, I kind of say, yeah, I'll do that for you. And I might stand there i.e. photocopying something for someone. I might not really want to do it, but they're busy and I'll do it. And while I'm standing there, I'll be saying I'm doing the right thing. And it'll lift, that impatience and that anger and whatever I might have, and it does go.
Okay, my sponsor was an integral part of the process of step 6, as with all the steps really. She's the one that's guided me through the steps. She was there to read my step 4 out to. She was there to help me identify, get to the root cause of my behaviour, and she helped me identify the character defects. I asked her to write a list of the things that she saw in me from what she knew about me, and actually name some of the defects that I needed to work on and to change. So I used the step to identify the things that I knew about, and also the things that she identified in me as well. She also shared her experience around the step, which really helped me to understand the step and how it worked.
So it's really about saying, I now don't have to simply act out on those defects of character, because I think in step 6 we're accepting that we don't need to simply be fixed in our way anymore.
So that was a nice feeling when I finally could, my ego could finally take the fact that I was being, having my defects highlighted, when my pride could, I could see past it. Then it was a relief to be ready. And I really was ready.
This is a journey from, if you like, the old self to the new self. Or sometimes what I like to say is actually going back to the self that I was born to be. Because the person I have become in my addiction is not the person I was born to be. And so hopefully what I'm doing actually, is maybe going back a new improved version of how I should be.
So there's a lot of things that were uncovered that I just can't see for myself, and that is why I was in addiction for such a long time, because I was blinded by my own lies, really. I believed my own lies in the end, and it took another person to listen to my inventory to be able to point out what I was unable to see for myself. Step 7 is all about humility. It's admitting that you've got things wrong, you've made mistakes, and you can't do it on your own. It's about allowing other people and allowing your higher power to come in and work for you and to do the things for you that you can't do for yourself. I was ready to have my defects of character removed, and I asked for them daily to be removed.
Step 7 talks about our shortcomings, and shortcomings are where we come up short, where we act on our defects. So this is about almost the addict and the alcoholic now softening. And it's such a beautiful step, because what you see is the humanness of them again. It's almost like that tight, rigid, fear, self-centeredness starts to drop when they now realise that I'm just human. I make mistakes like others. I don't have to beat myself up. I can recognise now that I do wrong. I'm aware of when I do wrong, and now I can act on them. I can act on that and stop doing that.
That's what step 7 is to me. It's about handing it all over and letting go of all these defects of character that I've just kind of built up around my heart through my life.
And the shortcomings basically are my defects, like I spoke about earlier. My impatience, my intolerance, my self-seeking, my lust, my moral thinking, all that kind of stuff.
I ask for daily direction every day for my hang-ups, my shortcomings, my defects of character, my wrongs, whatever you want to call them, to be removed so that I can be a better person, to be of service and to be used to, humankind, to other people. And I can't do it on my own.
The main guiding spiritual principle in step 7 is humility. It's about asking for help. It's about recognising that I can't do it by myself, that my way of dealing with things doesn't usually work, and that I don't have the power to change things by myself.
Unless we learn humility in recovery, we're lost. Humility is one of the keys. There are a few keys to recovery. I think gratitude is one, but I think humility is really important. Again, people struggle with the word humility because they think it means humiliation a lot of the time. And actually, humility is about a strength. There's a strength in humility, which I think people don't sometimes understand. And there is the strength of being able to say that I accept. So there's an acceptance there, which is also important. I accept that I have these defects. I accept that I need to change. And so I'm humble enough to actually give in, to surrender, to give up and say, do you know, I can't do this anymore.
It's the ability to accept I am who I am. I've made some mistakes. I'm now aware of the exact nature of the mistakes I've made and not the perception of what I think I've made. And I know where I come up short sometimes. And I'm willing to change them. But also, I'm a good person. I've got some good qualities. And I'm willing to incorporate that into my everyday life.
Humility is balance, which means we accept what we are short of, but we also accept our strengths. And I think the main tool in making change is recognising we have strengths that we can use to make those changes. So it's that willingness to take on those changes, but also accepting we have resources to do it. So we begin to have choice about our behaviours, our attitudes. We can make things different for ourselves, and also we're open to listen to other people and to allow our higher power to guide us in this.
Humility at the time to me was just like I couldn't grasp it, and only being brought to my knees was I able to ask for help. So humility to me is knowing that I'm not big enough and I don't know enough to do the right thing, and that I always have to ask for help.
I'm actually saying, this is who I am. There is a self-acceptance. Yeah, I may be in recovery, but I still have these things that I need to change. So by changing those, as I say, we ask God to help us. You know, I'm entirely ready for God to remove my defects of character. So there's a certain amount of trust which comes into the spiritual side of this. We have to say, okay, I trust power greater than me that I can do this.
I also realised that through working the programme I'd already started to change. You know, I was starting to bring spiritual principles into my life. I was starting to do things differently, and although these defects were still there, they had already started to change just by applying the programme to my life. By asking a higher power to work in my life, I was already starting to change.
One of the spiritual principles of 7 is patience. And I'm an addict and I want everything yesterday. So I'm impatient by my nature. And one of the hardest things for people in recovery is patience, is to realise that I can't have everything the minute I think about it. And that I cannot have this change without work. Because I need to work at this change. It's not something that comes because I've ticked a box and done an exercise. This is a lifetime journey, and I really have to understand that patience is, again, it's one of the keys to recovery.
And I don't always find that easy. I've still got loads of my defects of character. My ego rebuilds itself very, very quickly. So this is why I have to do this on a daily basis. I humbly ask on a daily basis for my shortcomings to be removed. But it doesn't happen overnight. It is a slow process. And it's about, it's about just opening up your heart and saying, come on, work through me, get rid of this rubbish and put something better in its place.
I pray to my higher power. If I'm feeling fearful in a situation, I will pray for courage. If I'm feeling angry, I will pray for that anger to go away. And pray for the strength I need to manage the situation. When I pray, I immediately become open to something else working in my life.
And I'd always believed in a power that I choose to call God. I'd always believed in that. I just wasn't connected to it. Today I'm connected to it. And I stay connected to it by doing certain routines and rituals in the morning that I do, and then in the evening time as well. and I stay connected to it throughout the day, you know, and I seek it, and I ask that power, you know, make me patient, make me tolerant, you know, make me worthy, let me benefit others.
Things are presented to me, you know, in my life. Things are presented to me by things that I read, things that I find out, things that I hear, or situations that happen, you know, teach me and show me the things that I need to change. So part of step 7 for me is deepening the step 3 decision that I made, you know, the handing my life and my will over to my higher power.
And it's a concentration of 4, 5, 6 and 7 where you're looking at yourself. You're looking at yourself. And at 7, we see the addict and alcoholic becoming who they were always supposed to be and not what they had become.
With this step, I didn't have too many expectations. I always hope for the best. But it's been a kind of drip feed, really, that it's been kind of a learning and a gentle and slow process, like an awakening of spirit, an awakening of self-awareness and awareness of other people, and not always putting myself first, you know, and yeah, just asking for help, really. That's what it means to me. Humility is knowing that I don't know, and that more often than not somebody else or my higher power does.